Hi, JP, and welcome to the Real Truth About Weight Loss Summit. Thanks so much for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. I'm excited to talk to you. So, JP, we know that exercise plays a huge role in our health, in our brain health, but what role can it play in weight loss?
Oh, well, there's multifacets that exercise or movement's going to play, but most people think that by exercising, that's going to help them lose weight. And that's really not the case unless you're chronically exercising. So average exercise that the average Joe would do a half hour to an hour, say in the morning or in the evening, is mainly there to make your health better. So it improves your immune system, improves your sleep, helps your metabolism a little bit, helps bone density and gets you stronger. So those are important things. And the reason why those are important for weight loss is because they improve your self-esteem. You're going to burn more calories if you're moving throughout the day because you have maybe 16 hours or so that you can move throughout the day, what we call the fidget factor. They call it non-exercise activity thermogenesis, all the movement that you do throughout the day that's not really exercise. So that's where we burn most of our calories. But exercising, unless it's chronic, really isn't the most efficient way to lose weight. That's going to all come from your diet.
What diet would you recommend for somebody that's trying to lose weight?
Well, not only to lose weight, but to be healthy and fit. A whole foods plant-based diet that's, obviously low to moderate amount of fat, but, still having some fat in their diet, unless they're a food addict, then of course, then we monitor nuts and seeds and things like that. But yeah, a whole foods plant-based diet does the job almost all the time.
That's terrific. Some people say they can't lose weight because they have a slow metabolism. Can exercise actually kickstart our metabolism?
It can help your metabolism a little bit, but generally the movements or the exercises that you do are very intense. It's called high intensity training. It's very hard on your system. When you're done doing maybe 20 to 30 minutes of what we call high intensity training, if you were to go to lay on the couch for the next 4 hours, your metabolism is then stroked up quite a bit. So that's true. There is some truth to that. But again, most of the weight loss that you're going to get is going to be from your diet. It's not going to be from fitness.
Right. So, what is the most effective way to burn calories, though? Because don't we need to create a calorie deficit to lose weight? I mean, how does exercise play a role in that?
Well, I mean, exercise, again, it's gonna draw from your calorie bank a little bit. So if you have body fat on you and you're eating a low fat, diet, and you're just taking in enough calories basically to run your metabolism and run your internal organs in your brain and everything, then when you go into a deficit by walking 20 to 30 minutes or doing some sort of aerobic activity, your body's going to say, hey, if you don't give me some fuel right now, meaning eat, then I'm going to take that stored fuel that you have on your body, your butt and your thighs and your arms, wherever, as fat, and I'm going to use it as energy. So that's how you start losing weight, through exercise. So that's one of the ways. It's not the most efficient, but that's how you do it. You also do, every time you're building muscle's metabolically active. So the more muscle you keep layering on yourself, the more calories that it's going to require to maintain it. Because basically fat is somewhat dormant compared to muscle. Muscle is so metabolically active, it's needing calories all the time. So one of the problems is as you get older, you start getting into like sarcopenia, where you start losing muscle mass. So by adding more muscles on, in theory, that's going to help your metabolism.
So, is it important to do strength training or resistance training and cardio, or is one or the other enough?
Well, for your health, absolutely. You need to do all those plus other things, balance training, coordination training. But in terms of health, you definitely have to do some sort of cardio training. But you only need maybe 12 to 15 minutes at a time of cardio to keep your heart healthy. You don't need, 45 minutes to an hour. You only need that if you're trying to be an athlete or accomplish some sort of athletic task. And then, of course, you need to build muscle because you're always losing muscle once you get into your 30s. It's just a downward spiral. So you definitely need that.
Is there a minimum daily requirement for the amount and type of exercise we should be doing in general for health, but also specifically if weight loss is our goal?
Well, I mean, if weight loss is your goal, number one, you want to do as many things that will build your self-esteem. So you don't just want to do aerobics because you want to see when you look in the mirror, you want to see some muscle definition in your upper body, your core, and things like that, because that's going to build your self-esteem. So you want to do some sort of strength training. So I'd say every day, if you could do a little strength training and maybe 10 to 12 minutes of cardio, that would be wonderful. And cardio could be as simple as walking or swimming or biking or jogging, jumping rope. You could do circuit training where you go from one exercise to another. So that keeps your heart rate up for just, again, 12 to 15 minutes is more than adequate for your health. And then, of course, any drain that you can get from exercise is going to help you burn some calories.
You keep mentioning self-esteem, and I've heard about that concept that exercise boosts our self-esteem from one of our other experts on the summit, Dr. Doug Lyle. Why is that important in terms of weight loss? And how does exercise actually enhance our self-esteem?
Well, because when people feel good about themselves, they're going to make good decisions. So, in other words, when you start looking better, you feel better, people are complimenting you. When you have that choice that you're going to make next time with food, most likely it's going to be a proper choice because you want to continue getting those compliments. You want to continue having people, praise you and tell you how great you're doing. So you're more inclined to take care of yourself when you have higher self-esteem.
Do you think there's a best time of day for exercise? Because I find that if I don't do it in the morning, I pretty much don't do it. And if we're actually using it to enhance our self-esteem, would it be best to do it in the morning?
Well, from a health standpoint, the morning is maybe the most important because you've been lying dormant for all these hours. Say you've been sleeping for 7 or 8 hours. So your metabolism is slowed down, your heart rate, your breathing, everything is slowed down, and your muscles have gotten tight. So when you wake up in the morning, that's a wonderful time to pick your heart rate up, blood pressure, everything starts getting up when you start moving, which is what you want. So you'll have more energy. But whenever you feel that you will exercise is the best time. But more important than getting half hour in, it's what you're doing throughout the day that's important. So living an active lifestyle is more important because that's going to burn more calories and that's healthier for your system if you're moving throughout the day. When you look at the blue zones, the people who live the longest in the world, whether it's in Greece or Italy or, even here in the United States, Loma Linda or Okinawa, if you look Costa Rica, you look at these places where they live the longest, most of them eat plant-based. They're eating a diet high in beans and, legumes, things like that. But the one common denominator is about every 20 minutes they're moving. So they're constantly moving throughout the day. And these are fit, trim, healthy people.
You mentioned movement throughout the day. So many people are sedentary because they have desk jobs. How, if they're working 8, 9, 10 hours a day sitting at a desk, how are they going to sneak movement in throughout the day?
Well, there lies the trick because one, we want to try to get them out of their chair as much as possible because sitting is, the new smoking. I mean, it's the worst thing for you, especially this prolonged sitting. So the more that you can get out of your chair, the better. If you can get a standing desk or make a standing desk at work, wonderful. That's not only going to burn more calories, but it's going to be healthier for you so you can have more mobility and move around a little bit more. Take frequent breaks throughout the day. So you go get water, you go to the restroom. Instead of sending an email, 50 feet down to your colleague, walk over there and talk to them if you can. Just try to move as much as you can. But you really have to make sure that you install in your life every half hour, getting out of your chair and doing some sort of movement. I have a lot of clients, they'll go to the restroom, they'll do maybe 10 or 20 squats, or they'll do 10 push-ups off the counter. But you got to sneak that movement throughout the day. Imagine if you could just do 10 squats and 10 push-ups, okay, every hour at work. And if you work 7 hours, well, there you go, 70 squats and 70 push-ups. That's pretty amazing. At the end of the week, that's a lot of squats and push-ups that you snuck into your day.
You once told a story at a conference that I was attending about somebody that you tricked while they were watching TV. Could you tell that story, how
Sure.
you tricked somebody to actually get exercise?
Sure. So I had a client that was, very, very heavy, over 300 pounds. And they walked with a cane and they were, getting to be in their late 50s. And they suffered from depression and things like that. So I needed a way to instill exercise or movement into their life. So what I did is I gave them some exercise bands and I said, okay, what I want you to do, and I gave them a protocol. This is what I want you to follow, but I only want you to follow it when the commercials are on TV. And so maybe 3 or 4 days later, they called me and they said, hey, JP, I think you really tricked me. And I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, you told me to only do these exercises when the commercials are on. And she said, do you know how many commercials are on TV? So she was finding herself watching 4 or 5 hours to TV a day. That's 15 minutes of commercials per hour. So, that's a lot of time that you're exercising. Then you can get an hour's worth of exercise in. So any way that you can sneak movement in addition to doing a traditional half hour to hour workout, that's going to really be most beneficial in terms of weight loss and improving your health.
I've often heard it say that exercise or movement is the most underutilized antidepressant and anti-anxiety medication. How do you feel about that saying, and what effect does exercise have on our mood?
Well, it's critical. I mean, when I work with people who have, moderate, low to moderate depression, I never sit in the office with them. So we go for a walk during our sessions all the time. And after 45 minutes, an hour, they always say the same thing. JP, I'm feeling really, really much better now. And it's not because, I'm doing some psychotherapy or Sigmund Freud or anything like that. Is they're out there breathing. So they're getting fresh air. If you think about somebody who's depressed, think about what their breathing is like. It's very slow and it's very, very shallow. Think about their posture. It's generally slouched forward, right? They have that depressed look. So right there, they don't get enough oxygen to their lungs. So just getting them moving is going to increase oxygen and give them more energy. They see the sunlight, the full spectrum of the sun's going to boost their the way they feel for sure. And of course, just talking and, getting out there and being active. If you exercise or move aggressively enough, that's when you really start releasing these endorphins, which are, opiate-like substance that reduce pain and they give you a sense of euphoria. So again, movement is pretty much can solve any problem. Like in the nutrition world, we say if you have a problem, kale is your answer.
Yeah.
Well, it's also movement is your answer.
So what role does willpower play in someone's ability to start an exercise program and stick with it?
Well, that's the challenge is, if most people had willpower, they wouldn't be in the predicament they're in. And so we want to circumvent willpower and we want to really want to encourage them to move things they enjoy. So, I have over 25 years in the geriatric field, and, these are people that are in their 70s and 80s. They definitely don't want to move. They would come into class looking very depressed and tired and, really kind of shuffling with their walk. And what I would do is I would get an industrial strength bubble machine and I would put it on a table that had wheels. So I would have everybody stand around me. I'd put on classical music and give each senior a pair of chopsticks and turn the bubble machine on. And to classical music, they would be trying to catch the bubbles with the chopsticks. And, 15 minutes of doing that, they felt like $1 million. So I didn't need to use willpower for them because if I tried to force them or really encourage them to move, they just wouldn't see a point to it. But if you made it fun and something that's doable, something they enjoyed, that's how we sneak the movement in.
That actually sounds fun, even for people that aren't seniors to do.
It is. Balloons are a lot of fun, and balloons and balls and bubbles.
You mentioned that for many reasons, morning is the best time to exercise if you can. Is that also when willpower is the strongest? Does willpower decrease throughout the day?
Yeah, well, your cortisol level, if you're healthy, is generally the highest. Cortisol and melatonin, they have this interesting system where cortisol is going to be high in the morning, so you're feeling more energy and you just feel alive. And melatonin is secreted at night from the pineal gland, and that's telling you to sleep. So in the morning, that's when generally most people have this high, so they feel really good. And you're making a good point, AJ, because what happens at the end of the day is that you've made so many decisions that you get something called decision fatigue. And that's why if you look at some of the top CEOs and successful people, even if you look at different politicians or people in high offices, president, vice president, they make so many decisions throughout the day. They don't want to make simple decisions like what they should wear, what they should eat. They want those made for them. So that's a good point that you're making.
That's a really interesting point because I love that because we think about certain famous people like Albert Einstein. They wore the same thing every day, Steve Jobs.
Right.
And one of the things I liked about being a chef, other than I was exposed to too much hyperpalatable stuff, is that it was very easy to get dressed because I wore the same thing every day. I never had to think about it. And now with my diet, I pretty much eat the same thing every day, so I never have to think about it. So how can we do that with exercise so that we never have to think about it, so that we just get up and do it?
Sure. Well, one is to remind yourself the reason you're doing it. To remind yourself of the benefits, your metabolism, your bones. Osteoporosis is a silent disease. Seniors will take a fall, they'll crack their femur, and a jagged cut will cut the femoral artery, and 30 seconds later, they're dead.
Or they die of pneumonia from being in the hospital.
Well, yeah, your immune system. And so movement or exercise, not only does it help your immune system, your bones, your metabolism, your heart, your balance, your endorphins, it helps everything. So remind yourself of why you're moving, that it's the closest thing that we've ever found to the fountain of youth. So remind yourself that. Also try to sneak movement in. In other words, if it's safe, park your car a little bit further. If you, like, for instance, I travel a lot, and I know Chef AJ, you do too. Well, you wake up in the morning, you've been sleeping for 8 hours, no movement there. Then you're taking a cab or a lift to the airport, no movement there. Then what do people do? They get to the airport and they sit for 2 hours before their flight comes, no movement there. Then they get on a plane for 2 hours, right? No movement there. And then they get to their destination, they take a cab and they go to the hotel and they're exhausted.
And then they lay down.
And then they lay down. So what you want to do is if you're traveling, what I do is once I get to the airport, I keep moving constantly. So I'm walking with my bags up and down, up and down, up and down. I sneak in, take the stairs. I remember I was doing a lecture for a corporation once, and then I left. And I was then just at the airport, maybe an hour or so early, and I was just squatting down, stretching. And the president of that company then walked right by me and he said, JP, he goes, you really do practice what you preach. And of course, well, you got to sneak movement any way you can. Try to sign up for some sort of classes with friends. So it'll be a little bit of pressure, a little leverage that you've signed up for this class, you paid your money, and now you have a friend depending on you to be there. Whatever sort of leverage you need to encourage you to move. But the funny thing is, once people start moving and they start feeling better and they see a difference, then they become obsessed with it. So it generally just takes a little bit. It's kind of like pushing a car out of the snow. You just get a little bit of momentum going and then boom, the car is free.
Well, I thank you for teaching me about airports because I used to just sit down too. And now, yesterday on my flight, I was waiting for it, and I literally got in 5,000 steps
Oh my
just
gosh.
waiting for my flight. And that's like half of what I usually get in a day at
Right.
home.
That'd be
And,
great.
and I started walking to terminals once I got through TSA that weren't even my flight, just to get more steps, and so I could have different scenery than just walking up and down a straight line. So that's really cool. This sneaking movement in. But what about people that just say, JP, I hate exercise. I hate everything. How would somebody that had a lifetime of inactivity even get started?
Well, again, I'm looking when I'm working with them, I'm looking to make sure they don't have any severe depression or some nutritional deficiencies or iron deficiencies or B12, that they're just so fatigued or so depressed. That's one of the things you need to, figure out first. Again, what I do with them is I have them take a pedometer. So I have a $10 pedometer, then I have a Fitbit, and then you have your phone. Pick one of those, whatever it is, and just start monitoring your steps. When you look at the Amish men, they're getting, they can get up to 18,000 steps in a day. So if we could get between 8 and 10,000 steps a day, that would be really beneficial for your health. So what I would do is get a piece of paper and write Monday through Sunday. And then every 2 hours, so 10 o'clock in the morning, 12, 2 o'clock, so forth, chart how many steps you've got. So at 10 o'clock in the morning, look at your pedometer, your Fitbit, and say, oh, I've got 500. And then Tuesday comes along and go, wow, yes, I got 500 at this time. I want to get at least 520. So you make a game out of it. Take some index cards, take maybe 3 index cards and write squats, planks, and say push-ups. And the push-up one, you're going to put in the kitchen to remind you every time you go in the kitchen, do 10 push-ups off the counter. The squat one, you put in the bathroom. So every time you're using the bathroom, the restroom, do 10 squats. And then a plank you would put in your front room. So every time in your front room, you hold the plank for 15 seconds. You've got to find a way to sneak it in your life somehow. No matter how small it is, some sort of way to sneak it in.
The pedometer is a great idea. And a lot of people, they already have a pedometer. They have their iPhone. It's automatically a pedometer. They don't necessarily even have to buy one.
Right.
And people don't realize that even small changes made consistently over time can lead to huge results. One of the experts on this summit, Dr. Roizen, told about a patient he worked with that was getting only 66 steps a day. She was in a wheelchair and diabetic. She was a grandmother, and he gave her a pedometer, and she goes, well, I don't walk. I just get to go to the bathroom a few times a day. He goes, no problem. Just you get 66 steps a day. Tomorrow do 67, and the next day do 68. Well, guess what happened eventually? She got up to 10,000 steps, became non-diabetic, and got out of the wheelchair. So
right. Yeah, you build momentum.
Everybody has to start somewhere. Well, you knew a lady that you met when she was 50 years old that hated exercise, but somehow got her to exercise.
Well, that was you.
Yeah. So you want to tell the story?
Well, it was funny because AJ and I taught for Whole Foods. They flew us down to train 100 of their employees for an immersion. And we met there. And then one day when I was at a hiking trail, I saw AJ and we started talking. And I said, well, I didn't know you come to the hiking trail. And she said, oh, yeah, I'm here all the time. So we decided to meet. And so we met. And when I saw her there, she had 2 blankets down on the ground and she had her 2 dogs there. And I said, I thought we were meeting to go hiking. She said, oh, she goes, I said, I go to the hiking trails. I just don't hike though. So then she just would go to the hiking trails, but she wouldn't hike. So then we started slowly but surely trying to encourage her to hike a little bit. We did a few exercises. I gave her some exercise bands. She attached them to her refrigerator door handle. So she snuck movement in. And now she's kind of a certified, fanatic.
Right.
Doing yoga and everything.
Yeah. And speaking of yoga, even at the airport, I find a wall and people are taking my picture because I'm doing stretches. I don't care what they think. Well, they say we never really overcome an addiction. We just transfer it for another.
Exactly. So I've had a lot of clients that were alcoholics or drug users or, gamblers, some sort of addiction. And when we get rid of that addiction, they cross over to the exercise addiction, which is fine because that takes care of their dopamine. It makes them feel good. They love it. The only danger with that is if their only dopamine blast now is through exercise, then you have to be careful because if they ever get hurt and they can't exercise, then they're going to be more inclined to go back to one of their addictions. So that's why cross training or doing lots of different exercises is important, because then you won't get an overuse injury. So if you're always swimming and suddenly now you get a shoulder injury, well, then you have to be careful, because then what are you going to do? You could get a paddle board and hold it tight and just use your legs, but then you might get an overleg use with your legs. So you want to keep a variety of movements in so you don't get hurt.
What about people that are just very, very heavy that really almost can't even walk, or people that have severe joint pain? Like, could water exercise be something they could start with?
Sure. Well, like a lot of people, I just, people have come to me that are in a wheelchair, or maybe they have an injury, so they have a boot on. I actually just give them movements or exercises to do in a chair. And that's fine, because you can still get lots of strength training in a chair for sure, lots of flexibility, lots of coordination, different exercises you can do. But of course, swimming is one of the best things, because in terms of people who have joint injuries or pain, because obviously you're floating. It's like being an astronaut in outer space. You're floating, so there's no stress on your joints. So it has benefits that you can get a lot of flexibility. You can do a little bit of strength training. The disadvantage is it's harder to develop bone density when you're in the water. So you really have to work a little bit harder. But sometimes you can also invest in something called a vibrational plate, which is actually something you can stand on or sit on that's vibrating at such a high rate that it's actually stimulating your bones to grow, actually. So that it's a wonderful tool.
What did you say to me that maybe you say to other clients that say, but I don't like exercise?
Well, I said to you, well, you're always telling people to eat their vegetables for breakfast, and they're always complaining they don't like it. And you say, suck it up. And so
you don't have to like it.
yeah,
You just have to
you just have to do it. I mean, at first, you're generally not going to like it, because your body, from a primitive standpoint, is trying to always conserve calories. It's trying to be in the cave where it's safe, so you don't have to get out and do exercise, because that's more of a threat of you getting hurt. You're exposing yourself in the elements. You're burning calories. Your body wants to conserve them. So it's wired inside us to be like that. But you have to be smarter and understand that now we need to have movements for our health. Not just weight loss, but just for our all-around health, we have to do it.
JP, why do you think it is that the participants in the Ultimate Weight Loss Program that we run together will adapt to the diet, but they seem to be more resistant to the idea of movement or exercise? It seems to be harder for most of the people.
Well, again, one of the biggest challenges with weight loss is everybody thinks it's just about exercise and diet, and it is really about the diet, but they don't understand that the exercise is to build their self-esteem, so they'll stick to the so-called diet.
Right.
That's the thing. And people generally that are in weight loss programs, generally, I'm not saying everyone, but they have self-esteem issues, and they often were chosen last in gym class. So they have negative experiences with movement or exercise. So they're almost anti it. They weren't the jocks in school. They were more maybe the whatever it was, the hippies or the nerds. So they have a negative connotation to exercise. And that's why I generally don't like to use the term exercise. I use the term movement, because it's more accurate. But what we have found, at least I see it all the time in Ultimate Weight Loss, is that once people start moving and they see the benefits and they feel the benefits, they become addicted to it. Because there's probably nothing that exercise doesn't help. There's really nothing in terms of your body. Whatever it is, it's going to help. And then it's like going down this rabbit hole. It affects everything, because once it helps you sleep better, and then your sleep controls so many different things. It controls lots of different hormones like ghrelin and leptin and cortisol, which all revolve around weight loss or weight gain. So it's like it does everything beneficial for us in movement. It does everything. It is the fountain of youth. And the one common denominator, again, with the people who live the longest in the world and have the least disability, is constant movement.
Great. So a lot of people think that if they exercise more, they'll burn more calories and they can eat more, but that's not true, is it?
It only is true generally is if you're doing chronic exercise. So if you look at, you've never seen an ultra endurance runner who's heavy. So ultra endurance runners will have a smoothie in the morning with 5,000 calories, because they're chronically exercising. So those people who are doing hours upon hours upon of exercise every day, then it's true, it's accurate. You're burning a ton of calories exercising. But for the average Joe, most of your calorie burning should be the fidget factor. It should be what you're doing throughout the day that isn't exercise, but it's moving around. That's critical.
Well, Dr. Furman, who's also an expert on this summit, has said you can't outrun your mouth. But some people say that when they exercise, JP, they actually get hungrier, and they get hungrier sooner, and they're afraid that's going to lead to them eating more calories.
Well, if you exercise aggressively enough, yes, sometimes you do, but some people get anorexic, they lose their appetite. So everyone's different. And the thing is, then when you do become hungrier, if you're trying to lose weight, that's one of the most beneficial signals you're getting, because what your body is saying is, I'm hungry. And if you don't eat, I'm going to take that magic that you have stored on your body called fat, and I'm going to use it as fuel. Your body doesn't want to do that. But you knowing better that you're 30, 40, 50 pounds overweight, you're like, go ahead and do it. So you have to make sure that when you feel that sensation, whatever you do, you don't go in, you don't give in and start eating high calorie foods, but feel free to eat pretty much all the fruits and vegetables, particularly vegetables and green leafy vegetables, as you want. Because those are basically vegetables, maybe 100, 125 calories a pound. You're going to be full very quickly. So you can't really gain weight on that.
Absolutely. Do you think there's a best time to eat? Before exercise, after exercise? Because I found that if I eat, I can't exercise, even gentle yoga. But some people say, well, then I won't have energy to fuel my workout. So is one better for weight loss or fat loss?
Well, that's an interesting question, because it depends what type of workout they're doing. When they say they can't fuel their workout, I mean, everybody, even you, AJ, who's such a low percentage of body fat, you have enough body fat on your body to run a couple marathons. So we have enough fuel to take us through these workouts. It's you just are not used to that sensation of being hungry. And that's something that we need to learn to be able to handle, is that sensation of hunger. Generally, if you're trying to lose weight, generally it'd be better to exercise on an empty stomach. So you're more inclined to draw fat reserves than if you're fueling yourself up.
Does it matter if you're doing cardio or strength training?
Does it matter for what?
As far as eating before or after, or how long should you wait after exercise to eat?
Well, generally it depends on what your goal is. But generally, no. If your goal is to lose weight, I would try your best to exercise on somewhat of an empty stomach. Yeah, other than water, hydrate.
So the first of the year, everybody joins a gym. Not everybody, but a lot of people. That's probably when they get most of their memberships, and maybe they go for a few days or a few weeks, and then by Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, they have stopped going. And when they were going, they were driving around the parking lot for a half hour to find the closest space. Why does it seem to be so hard for people to have the motivation to exercise? And then even when they get it, to make that motivation stick?
Well, again, it's programmed in us not to move. It's programmed in us to eat high fat foods, high sugary foods. It's survival. People in our society have been trained to think being skinny is the solution, and that's going against our genes. Your genes are telling you absolutely not. The more fat that you have and the more that you rest and sleep, the safer you're going to be. So, you're going against your genes right off the bat. And number two, it would be helpful if you set short-term goals for yourself. So in other words, get a reward. And let's say, for instance, you have a certain show that you enjoy watching every night, or whatever. You have a bunch of them. Well, you're not allowed to watch your show unless for that day you got a certain amount of steps in and a certain amount of movement in. And then the same thing with on the weekends. If you could go for the whole entire week, so what come Friday or Saturday, and you did all your movement, well, then you get to go to a movie, or you get to do whatever you want. You get some sort of award. So until it gets ingrained in your system and you become addicted to it, it's going to take a little bit of work at first.
I think that's a great strategy. And I have a spin bike, and I do not allow myself to watch anything on Netflix or Amazon Prime unless I'm spinning.
Perfect.
And when the show's good, I could be spinning for 95 minutes.
Exactly. Yeah, you have to kind of trick your brain, unfortunately.
Yeah. So you've worked with a lot of clients, a lot of celebrities. What are the most common roadblocks that you see in your clients?
Well, I'd say one of the biggest ones is I don't have the time. That's my favorite one to get, because that's wonderful if you don't have the time, because that means you're telling me you don't have a half hour or an hour in the morning. That's fine. Then what I'm going to have you do is set up the index cards. I'm going to have you put on a pedometer. You're going to put an exercise band in every room or a set of weights in every room in the office, and you're just going to sneak it in. So that's wonderful. I mean, I'd rather actually have somebody sneak movement in throughout the day than give me a half hour or an hour in the morning. So that's my favorite excuse, because we can work around that right away.
What do you mean by set up the index cards?
Well, if we put the index card in the kitchen, so every time you walk in the kitchen, it says push-ups, right. You know that you're going to do 10 push-ups off the counter. When you use the restroom, you're going to see it says 10 squats. So you're done using the restroom, you're going to do 10 squats. So you put index cards and little reminders throughout the day, throughout your house or your office, to sneak movement in. It's far better to sneak movement in than to devote a half hour, an hour to workout. Far better.
Absolutely. And I think if people are listening to this summit, or if they're on Facebook, they have time to exercise.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime you're listening to a podcast, you should be walking around. When I do phone consults, I'm not just sitting down, I'm walking around. And I know that a lot of times when you're on the phone, AJ, you're outside and you're walking.
I do all my consults either on the spin bike or walking.
That's a wonderful thing to do.
And I feel like I have more creativity and I think better that way too. If I'm just sitting there, I'm like, nothing comes to me.
Yeah, they've done studies on what they do is they'll give an exam to a group of kids, and they'll have one group sitting and the other group standing, and the group that stands always scores higher. You have more oxygen to your brain. You can think more efficiently than when you're sitting, because when you start sitting, people start getting tired. That's one of the problems. They start getting tired when they start sitting. But when you're standing up, your body is constantly it's on. It's preventing you from falling all the time. So there's proprioception. So your body is alive. It's electric. It's on. But when you're sitting, you go into this like sensory motor amnesia where things start falling asleep, including your brain.
I know you've worked with a lot of celebrities in Hollywood and other places. I don't know if you're allowed to mention any of them, but if you are, could you mention what you've done for them? And if you can't mention their name, maybe the kind of results you've had with them?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people have seen johnpierre.com, which is my site. And the only reason I keep that site up now is because when I was training Ellen DeGeneres, they used some very expensive cameras and to film me training Ellen and her staff. And so it was really, really great footage. So that's on there. You'll see me training Ellen. And what was interesting, one of the things that I had done is I had trained Ellen to do knuckle push-ups. And there's a reason I did that, because one, it helps a lot of women say to me, is it okay if I do girl push-ups? And then I'll do knuckle push-ups and I'll say, yeah, as long as they look like this.
Why are they calling them girl push-ups instead of knee push-ups?
Well, that's there, and there's a problem. You've already set yourself up for disaster by saying it's a girl push-up, meaning that it's less than a man's push-up. So I don't ever call it a girl's push-up, and I don't even call it a push-up. But the point is by Ellen, when by training Ellen, who's a woman and she's vegan, and now they're seeing her do knuckle push-ups. That was a wonderful thing. And she went on the Jay Leno show and she did those. And, she kind of shocked the world with that. And of course, she did a push-up competition between her and Michelle Obama, which was wonderful. So yeah, it doesn't really matter if I'm training celebrities or anybody, but I'm always trying to take them up the ladder to do more than they thought they can do, to not only build their self-esteem, but to build themselves physically. And it doesn't matter who they are.
A lot of people, especially men, feel that they're not going to be able to build muscle on a plant-based diet. But I know you've worked with some famous directors that you've put 40 pounds of muscle on them. So what do you say to people that say a plant-based diet isn't manly, or it's certainly not manly enough to build muscle on a man or a woman?
Well, just look at the biggest animals in nature. Look at a silverback gorilla. My gosh, look at a rhinoceros. You look at a horse, look at a water buffalo. So the biggest animals in nature, of course, are herbivores. And I was working with the producer and director and writer of Earthlings, which is probably one of the most important movies of our time, a documentary. And he came to me at 6'2", 165 pounds. And I built him up to 215 pounds.
Of muscle, though.
Oh, of course, pure muscle. Matter of fact, when I first started with him, his bench pressing was only 35 pounds in each hand. And as I got toward the end of training with him, I stopped him at 105 pounds in each hand. So obviously you can build muscle. Of course, your muscles are 22% protein, they're over 70% water. So all this nonsense thinking that you need high amounts of protein to build muscles is absolutely crazy. I mean, it's just crazy. You don't need a high amount of protein to build muscle. You do need protein, but you need other factors too. And the most important thing to build muscle is working hard and then resting and recovering.
Right. Oh, well, the strongest man in the world is Patrick Barboubian.
Yeah, he's
vegan.
He's amazing. One of the strongest men in the world from Germany. He's amazing. And I saw him in Canada. I was teaching at the Toronto Veg Fest where he set the world's record there. It was amazing. And the new movie that'll be coming out too is called Game Changers. And that's all on vegan athletes. That's going to be an amazing movie too.
Wow. What's the most inspiring weight loss transformation story you've seen in one of your clients?
Wow, I've seen quite a few. And obviously in ultimate weight loss, there's been dozens and dozens and dozens of people that have done unbelievable transformations. But one girl in particular that I had worked with, came to me at over 300 pounds and, really could barely walk around the block. And she had called me and she said, you don't know me and I've never met you, but I've heard all about you. And if you can't help me, then I'm going to have to get a gastric bypass. So, I started working with her and, obviously, a whole foods plant-based diet. and the movement that we did was very minimal. I mean, she could barely move. So we just did a lot of walking and then slowly sneaking movement into her day. But to make a long story short, soon enough, she was running a half a marathon, and then she became a yoga instructor, and then she became a very accomplished yoga instructor where her classes were being sold out, and she started teaching meditation and breathing, and she just then became an animal activist where she was actually rescuing animals. It was amazing. So and then her whole entire family then became vegan. So not only did it change her life, but it changed her two daughters and then her husband's life. So there's story after story after story like that, and especially in ultimate weight loss we've seen it. And again, it's just people at first, they don't believe that they're going to be able to do it. And I always tell them, you should watch AJ's story, watch the story that she did with Dr. McDougall, and see how far that, she's come from, all the trauma and that she's had in her life. And if she can do it, then I'm sure that you can do it. So there's always hope, no matter where you are. You just have to be honest. You have to be doing the right program and hopefully working with the right coach or somebody who can give you positive feedback and instruct you properly.
So people could work with you privately if they wanted to, I would imagine.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I do phone consults all the time.
That's neat. How do you know if you should take a day off? Because you said if people get injured, then they're really not going to be able to exercise. But sometimes you're just a little sore,
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good question. It really depends. If you think about primitive people who live in these blue zones, they don't ever take a day off, but they're also not exercising, they're moving. Mm-hmm. So if you're talking about traditional exercise, the secret is to keep rotating exercises so you're not overdoing one particular area. If you're walking on Monday and Tuesday you're swimming, okay, well, that's giving your body a little bit of a break. And then say Wednesday, maybe you go back to walking or you're doing some jumping rope or biking. You want to constantly be rotating things. And then if you want to take a day off, let's say you feel fatigued or tired and you don't feel like moving a lot, well, then maybe that would be a day you could focus a little bit more on yoga, or you could focus on breathing, you could focus on foam rolling. But again, your body's designed to move. As a matter of fact, it doesn't function properly unless it is moving, because it's the movement that activates parts of the body. You can't stick a pin in the body without touching lymphatic system, your lymph fluid. So every time you move and you exercise, you're turning your lymphatic system on, which is your immune system. So you really don't want to stop moving throughout the day. So yes, you could take a day off of traditional exercise, but you should still be doing some stretching or yoga or breathing, things like that.
Absolutely. I know you've had over 30 years experience working with senior citizens, doing brain building exercises. How does exercise affect our cognitive function, especially as we age? And why is it so important for that?
That's so important. I mean, number one, right off the bat, it's increasing oxygenation and circulation. It causes vasodilation of the blood vessels. So especially the carotid artery or vertebral arteries, you want these opening up to deliver more blood flow to the brain. Because a lot of seniors, they get cerebral vascular insufficiency. So the carotid artery gets an occlusion. You're building up all this plaque. So it's almost the equivalent of you just being choked. You're not getting enough oxygen and blood flow to your brain. So not only do you not get oxygen, but you're not getting adequate nutrients and waste removal. So exercise right off the bat helps with that. It also helps something called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is like miracle grow for the brain. It helps develop new neurons and allows better communication between the cells. So every time you're exercising somewhat aggressively, it really helps that brain-derived neurotrophic factor, probably better than anything else. Fasting actually can help in saunas, and maybe DHA. There's certain supplements that help, but really nothing helps as much as movement or exercise. And then, of course, the secret with exercise is you want to be doing some exercises that require you to learn something new and or to do coordination. So if you're playing tennis or ping pong or juggling, or some sort of movement where you're moving laterally or dancing, those are things that are stimulating your brain, and that's critical. So those are some of the ways that the movement would help your brain for sure.
I know you said that when people say they don't have time to exercise, you said that's great, we'll get you to sneak it in. But what about people that say, I'm just too tired to exercise?
Well, again, you need to look at that to see what are they tired from. Again, a lot of people that we unfortunately work with are dealing with depression. Working with a lot of people have post-traumatic stress disorder and depression, and you don't feel like moving. And some people have adrenal exhaustion. You're burning out literally these organs. So there is some validity to that. So in that case, once we get all the medical checkups and I know they're hydrated well, they got enough B12, their iron's good, and all the basics, then I have them just do basic things when they're sitting. Just when they're watching TV, can you lift your arms up and down 10 times? Can you do some deep diaphragmatic breathing for me to get more oxygen in? Sometimes it's as simple as that, just trying to sneak a little bit of movement in. Because once you get moving, I've never met anybody who, once they start moving, as long as they don't have some serious condition, doesn't feel better. Everybody starts feeling better. They just feel this is the best thing ever.
Right. And sometimes people have insomnia, and when they get a regular exercise program, they actually start sleeping better. How is exercise and sleep connected?
Well, gosh, that's a wonderful question because, first of all, sleep disorders are rampant. Most of us don't realize we sleep 36% of our life. 64% of our life we're awake, but a good portion of our life we sleep. But unfortunately, most people today, we're not sleeping enough, and it's not very sound sleep. And when you don't get enough sleep, there's lots of things that happen. Your cortisol level goes up, and that basically causes more body fat, especially belly fat, to develop. Your ghrelin and your leptin, these are hormones. Ghrelin regulates hunger, and all of a sudden you don't get enough sleep, you're hungry all the time. Leptin regulates you're getting full, and all of a sudden that signal says, hey, I'm not full. So people who don't get enough sleep can eat 500, 1,000 more calories per day, and most of those calories come from sugar. So just something by not getting enough sleep can throw everything off. And the nice thing about exercise is that exercise is a way to reduce stress. And without getting into it in this podcast, it's important to understand that, there's an area of your brain, the amygdala, that's kind of like the smoke alarm of the body. And it's on, it's looking for dangers and things like that. And when you're not getting enough sleep, that area really starts lighting up, and it makes you more sensitive to pain. It makes you hyper alert. So you want to do everything you can to get enough sleep, and exercise is one of the things that helps calm that down, dissipate stress, relax you a little bit, especially if it's kind of a little bit more on the aggressive side. So a little power walking, some strength training. I mean, the benefits are just innumerable to even talk about, but it definitely helps with sleep.
Right. I agree. Just getting the people to start, that seems to be the biggest challenge.
And even if you just start in your chair, by just deep breathing. Just deep diaphragmatic breathing is exercise. That's a start. And then when you're watching TV, just remind yourself, every time the commercial's on, I'm going to just lift my arms up 10 times, or I'm going to get out of my chair, walk to the kitchen, and walk back. Just start that way. Because the two things you're going to need to do the rest of your life is to squat, get in and out of a chair, get in and out of a toilet or a car, and ambulate, walk. So you don't want to lose those two movements. So you want to practice walking and practice squatting.
Absolutely. Well, you've worked with hundreds of people on their fitness and nutrition over the years, but what makes you confident to say that there's really a solution to losing weight?
Well, because I've done it with all my clients. I've never had any client in all the history that I've worked over 30 years that hasn't been able to lose weight effectively. And quite honestly, fairly simply, as long as they're following the program. I mean, if you follow the program, it's kind of like if AJ, you make some sort of, let's say, for instance, you were to make a dessert that every year you win the gold medal in, and all of a sudden you give that recipe to me, and I follow that recipe in the same syntax, the same order as you did, and I use all the ingredients, and you quit the competition this year, and I go in, I should basically win. So as long as you follow the right formula, and you have a coach or somebody to help you to kind of check things out, we look at your food diary, thing like that. Well, it's almost impossible to fail. I've actually never seen it in all the years that I've worked, somebody who's not been able to lose weight. And I don't even weigh my clients, but I would say on average, the clients who come to me that over 300, 350 pounds, they know how much they weighed when they came to see me. And a year or so later, they go get a physical checkup, and almost always universally down by about 100 pounds. That's just the way it goes.
I hear you're working with a new client that has a remarkable physique.
Yeah, he does. He's 475 pounds. And there's a reason why he's 475 pounds, because he's the world sumo and judo champion. And he's from Egypt. And he's been vegan now with me for about a month. And according to him, because I don't have him weigh himself, but I think about now he's probably down 35, 40 pounds. And basically all we're doing is just switching him to a plant-based diet. So actually in the history of sumo, he would be the first vegan sumo wrestler in history. So he's doing remarkably well. And it was very interesting because when I first start training him, sumo is a lot about leverage and balance. And I start working him out, and he said to me, he goes, it's funny when you hear him talk, he said he's been training since he's 5, and he's the world sumo and judo champion. He said, when I worked out with JP, after 10 minutes, he said like this, he goes, he killed me. He killed me. And it was interesting because I was doing so much stuff that he had never done before. So when I work with clients, if they're really good at something, I don't do it. I do things that they're not really good in, which is always harder for them. So he's done remarkably well. And I think it'll be pretty easy for him as long as he sticks with the program to drop 200 pounds should be pretty good to start out with. And he'll retire from sumo and then he'll probably maybe just stay into judo.
That's great. So many people think that if they are going to be on a plant-based diet and exercise, they're going to need protein powders or supplements. I mean, is that true?
Well, supplements, protein powders you don't need. You can get all the protein you need in food. The only time I would use a protein supplement is, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes when I work with an athlete, some people work hard enough they get anorexic. So that means they lose their appetite. So in that case, I have to make them smoothies or a blended soup. And oftentimes they get full very quickly. So sometimes I might use a smoothie mix. But no, normal people don't need to take protein. In terms of supplements, yes, of course, there's some supplements that I always recommend. For sure, B12. If you're not getting enough sun, then vitamin D for sure. Eating sea vegetables to get a good source of iodine, because iodine does affect the metabolism. And vegans can, be low in iodine, especially in our ultimate weight loss program. We don't use iodized salt. So really our best sources of iodine would be potatoes. That would be if those potatoes are grown in an iodine-rich soil, which you're not really sure about. So I circumvent that by having clients use sea vegetables, which are always a good source of iodine. And there's other supplements too, but those are the basics.
And I love dulse, the smoked dulse. It's delicious,
it's
actually.
Excellent. And nori just is great because it just looks like a sheet of paper. You make your salad and just kind of wrap it up in there. Or you can tear sheets of nori and just put it in your soup, and they turn to like a noodle-like consistency.
Are there certain foods that are better for recovery as we're improving our fitness?
Depending on what somebody did, but I generally love when my clients are working out very hard for them to get legumes in their diet. So beans, peas, or lentils to get some good amino acids and B vitamins, and then a good carbohydrate. So eat something like sweet potatoes or squash would be wonderful. And then of course, if you are exercising hard and aggressively a lot, you're creating a lot of free radicals. So you do want to make sure you get enough antioxidants in. So again, any fruit or vegetable is good, but blueberries in particular have a lot of antioxidants that would help recover.
I've heard you say before, though, that fruit is great when you have it right after a workout.
Well, that from a weight loss standpoint, yes, because most of that sugar from fruit is going to get sucked into your muscles and your liver as glycogen, the storage form of sugar, and it'll be ready. It'll fuel you up. So tomorrow when you go to exercise, then you have the energy, because a lot of people, they don't get enough carbohydrates in and they feel drained the next day. And that's one of the reasons they didn't replenish with carbohydrates. So just by having beans and sweet potatoes, and of course having fruit after you're exercising, that in my opinion is the best time to have fruit when you're done.
Speaking of fuel, you have a famous saying that you're known for that uses the word fuel.
Yes, I always say, are you fueling yourself or are you fooling yourself? And what I mean by that is, a lot of people, unfortunately, in our society are suffering from obesity and lethargy and diseases because they've been fooling themselves. They've been using processed foods as medication, as entertainment. And there's a consequence for that. And that consequence is disease and, of course, obesity. So I ask my clients, when they're choosing a food and they have a sensation they need to eat, are they going to fuel themselves or are they going to fool themselves? If it grows from the earth, fruits and vegetables and whole grains and beans, peas and lentils, nuts and seeds and tubers, those are foods that generally fuel us. Now, there are some exceptions that if you have an addictive personality, a lot of people in ultimate weight loss that we work with can't have nuts because they eat 2 or 3 nuts and then they eat a pound of them. So in that case, we want you to get essential fatty acids and we want you to get the vitamin E. We want you to get the benefits from some of these fats. So we have you use ground flaxseed, which is a really good alternative, and no one's going to really overeat on that.
That's terrific. One of the things you're known for is love and compassion. So how does that play a role in somebody losing weight or starting a program that involves movement?
That's a great question. And that's probably my favorite question, because the core of everything that I do is based on a term called ahimsa, which means compassion or reverence for all beings. So 35 plus years ago, I became vegan because I didn't want to harm anything. I didn't want to harm any animals, didn't want to harm the planet. So one of the things that you'll find out is that when you learn to love yourself, you don't do things that hurt yourself. So then no longer are you going to really be wanting to fool yourself with your choices. You're not obviously going to you're not going to eat animal products because you don't want to hurt animals and you don't want to contribute to world hunger and, destroying the rainforest and things like that. But you're also going to be making proper decisions now because you have higher self-esteem, you love and care of yourself. So you're not going to be doing things that harm you. So that's really, once you get to that level where you have more love in your life, it's very easy to make choices because you're just doing choices that benefit not only yourself, but and benefit the animals and the planet and humanity.
Terrific. What would you say to someone who's given up hope that they could ever lose weight?
Oh, it's definitely never too late. The people lose hope because they're not on the right program. That's the challenge, is they've never done like the program that we do, the ultimate weight loss. They've never followed the low fat, whole foods, plant-based diet. And they've also probably never had the coaching that they need. Because remember, most people are suffering from low levels of depression, and they have low self-esteem issues. And unfortunately, a lot of people, I've worked with abused women for 30 years. So a lot of these women and men too, but especially women, are suffering post-traumatic stress disorder. And they're in constant pain mentally and emotionally. And they're reaching for the one thing that takes their pain away, which is processed foods. And it'd be no different that if somebody gets hit by a Mack truck, what do they need? They need morphine, they need a painkiller, right? And you don't blame them. So we shouldn't be blaming people who are obese and suffering from pain and trauma. It's just that we need to re-educate them and let them understand that we're going to give you other ways to deal with your pain and trauma that don't have consequences. Once you start sharing that with people, then all of a sudden it gives them hope again. Absolutely.
That's great. So many people starting out don't even have the right shoes. How do you direct somebody to get the right shoes for their workout?
Well, that's a good question. That's a whole topic in itself. I actually encourage people to, as much as they can, first check with your physician, but as much as you can at home, go barefoot. Because one of the challenges is that we're in these tight, compressed shoes all day long. And just one of the things I did with the sumo wrestler, I actually had the sumo wrestler. Have you ever seen, AJ, when you go get a pedicure, they put these toe spreaders in?
Yep.
And I actually have him sleep with those at night because it opens up your feet. When you look at people who live in primitive societies, barefoot, their foot is open like this. But if you look at people, especially women who wear high heels and tight shoes, as soon as they take off their shoes, their feet look like that.
And often they have bunions and
and neuromas, absolutely. So I would recommend talk to your physician first, but going as barefoot as you can. The shoes that I wear are called zero shoes, and they're a very wide shoe that has zero heel, so it's completely flat. And those are very good too. But you have to find a shoe that's comfortable for you. Now, I personally prefer for my clients to get a cross trainer. So that allows you to move laterally too. When you just wear a running shoe, often they have a huge heel and they're very cushiony, so it doesn't allow you to feel. The cross trainers are a little bit better because they also are designed to let you move laterally. One of the things that we've lost in our world today is the ability to move laterally and retro, backwards. We're always moving forward. So when you asked earlier about your brain, one of the things that I have clients do is dancing and tennis and soccer. So they're always moving in a different direction because that stimulates the brain.
That's great. I hear from so many people that are trying to follow a whole food plant-based diet that they go to their gym and their trainer is always trying to convince them that that's not a good diet for.
Oh, right. Well,
how do you talk to your trainer?
Well, first of all, you don't talk to your trainer about nutrition any more than you talk to your doctor about nutrition or your mechanic about nutrition. Your doctor's not trained in nutrition, and don't expect them to be. Don't expect your doctor to give you advice on, what stock to buy. I mean, that's not their job. Your trainer is, at best, has some information on exercise, maybe in anatomy and physiology, but the education they get in nutrition is abysmal at best, and it's very slanted toward a high protein diet. So yeah, you just basically say to your trainer or whoever you're working with, well, this is what's working for me, or my doctor has said this is what I should follow. And then hopefully that's the end of the discussion.
And other than the cruelty to animals and the destruction of the planet, what are the problems associated with a high protein diet?
Oh, well, gosh. I mean, aside from the high levels of fat, I mean, one of the reasons that people get so tired is the more fat that you're taking in, you get to get this blood sludging where your red blood cells basically get stuck together, almost like Velcro. And as they start sticking together, they're trying to make their way through these tiny, tiny microcapillaries to deliver oxygen, and they can't. It'd be like having 200 people in a room and you open up the door and tell everyone to run out. There's a traffic jam. So the high fat diet is a problem with that. The high animal protein is high in toxins, especially growth hormones. My God, when the meat and dairy industry, especially the dairy industry, tells you that milk builds strong bones and muscles, it's true. But they don't tell you that it builds other cells. So it causes other cells to hyper proliferate, like breast cancer cells or prostate cancer cells because of insulin-like growth factor in there. I mean, these animals today are not even animals. They're almost like science experiments. They're genetically breeding cows to have high levels of insulin-like growth factor. Then they inject them with the insulin-like growth factor. And that's why you're seeing these girls that are 8 and 9 pre-developing, precocious puberty. It's one of the most dangerous things you can get. Plus, these animal products are not loaded with antioxidants. Where's the beta-cryptozanethine, the lutein, right? Where are all these important antioxidants that protect our tissue? They have pro-oxidants in there like iron and copper, things that actually cause your body to age quicker. So, I mean, my gosh, we could spend weeks about the dangers of animal products. It's unbelievable.
Where's the fiber?
Exactly. Where's the fiber? That's a great point. Lacking all animal products are devoid of all fiber. So, and it's fiber and water, when they combine, they create the bulking effect that gives you that sensation you're feeling full. Those stress receptors feel, oh my gosh, my stomach is opening up, it's swelling, I'm getting full. It sends the signal to your brain, and all these hormones start going off telling you you're full. You know, cholecystokinin and all these different hormones.
That's one of the secrets to weight loss.
Absolutely.
What about people that say, oh, but I'm eating low-fat animal products like egg whites and skinless chicken?
Yeah, same thing. I mean, it's still no fiber. You're missing all these phytochemicals, antioxidants. They're too high in protein. And of course, we're not getting the carbohydrates we need. Our brain needs this carbohydrate fuel. You know, it definitely needs that. And that's the thing that a lot of these people in the paleo community, they're trying to get in these ketogenic diets and train their body to not use carbohydrates. And it is possible, of course, but it's not healthy for you. That's the problem. I mean, why do you think that we have sweet receptors in our mouth? And why do you think we're drawn to it? Because our body craves it. Our brain is one of the most metabolically active tissues in the entire body, and it requires carbohydrates to function. So, I mean, to restrict carbohydrates is really silly. I mean, it's malpractice.
It's crazy.
It's crazy.
So, JP, what is the real truth about weight loss?
Well, the real truth about weight loss is learn to love yourself and be loving and kind, so you'll make the proper decisions to give your body what it needs. Live an active lifestyle. So I'm not concerned about a half hour in the morning of exercise. I'm concerned about the rest of the 23 and a half hours in the day, what you're doing, making sure that you're eating a whole foods, plant-based diet with a variety of different foods. Get always a variety of them. And then make sure that, you know, you do your very best to keep yourself educated from reputable sources of information. So like Dr. Gregor Sorts and nutritionfacts.org is one of the best sources. Somebody like Brenda Davis has got incredible books, you know, Becoming Vegan, Becoming Raw, you know, all these vegan doctors that are out there, they have really great information. So keep yourself educated, listen to different podcasts like we're doing now. Keep informed on things because it allows you to stay inspired to continue on this path.
And many of the experts you mentioned are also experts on this summit, such as yourself. Thank you, JP, so much for being here.
Thank you.